Screenless. Hello and welcome to another episode of Creative Cuppa. I'm Gareth Davies, a composer and audio producer, and in each episode I chat with someone working in the many creative industries, which so far, after 50 plus episodes, remains an absolute pleasure. You can catch up with all of my previous episodes by subscribing to Creative Cuppa in your podcast app or heading to creativecuppa.uk. Basically, wherever you're listening to this, you'll probably see all of the other episodes, so fill your boots. So, what is a systems creative? I'll let Leigh explain. It was a new one on me too. Sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. Leigh Davies, systems creative. Welcome to Creative Cuppa.
Oh, thank you for having me, Gareth. It's a pleasure.
Oh, you're very welcome. Now, Leigh, on your website it says, there's a quote, "I define myself by the dishes I cook, not what's stocked on my spice rack." I love that. "I define myself by the system of my creativity, not the disciplines in my tool belt." So that quote is about delivering stories and experiences. Is that the best way to describe a systems creative, would you say? What can you tell me about what a systems creative does on a practical level?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that quote, the dishes I cook, not the spices stocked on my spice rack, it kind of sums up why I kind of spent the last 2 years kind of taking a look at my creative practice and looking to redefine myself. So it's only recently that I've been kind of referring to my professional identity as a systems creative. So it's been part of so I've recently finished my postgrad and I took a year and a couple of months, just over a year out to look back over the last 10 years really and go, what on earth have I been doing as a mixed disciplinary creative? It's been a really turbulent but wonderful, exciting experience. But it felt somewhat chaotic. It felt somewhat accidental. There was a lot of things there. I wanted to kind of go, right, let's look at what exactly I've kind of, the choppy seas I've kind of gone through really over the last sort of 8 or so years. And I arrived at that definition basically of a systems creative is someone that's kind of free from being defined by what they do. So instead of what they create and, the disciplines that they are, so musician or illustrator or designer, it's more about thinking of those as tools, as resources, like the spices on your spice rack.
Yeah.
And, it's the dishes you cook with those that are actually what define you. So it's, as you said, it's, as a creative, basically, I've found myself working in lots of disciplines over the years, and that's only kind of grown over the years as I've taken on more kind of interdisciplinary projects. And it kind of dawned on me, the more I was doing that, the more I was kind of without that kind of overriding identity of being a systems creator who delivers stories and designs experiences as that kind of top level identity for what I do. I was kind of at the mercy of being an imposter in all of the things I did. So
this is it. I didn't have to look at your website for long to realise that you're one of those people. And exactly. I count myself as one of those people as well. There are creative people who focus on one skill set, and that's absolutely great.
Nothing wrong with that, yeah.
And for a creative business, actually, that's more straightforward for clients, isn't it? I want a dialogue editor, so I'll hire a dialogue editor.
Of course, yeah.
But it doesn't work for everyone. And you're someone, again, looking at your website, whose focus is the idea and the different creative skills you have as simply the delivery system for that idea. So talk me through what happens when you have an idea. How do you decide what creative skills you're going to use and things like that?
Yeah, sure. So yes, so part of being a systems creative, so when it's an emerging kind of phrase I've coined recently as part of my postgrad research.
Is this something that you've come up with yourself then? And when you said systems creative, I wasn't entirely sure what you meant.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's seeming to me that, this is something that hasn't really existed before. I mean, obviously there are people who are multidisciplined, but to actually categorize yourself as that is something fairly new, I suppose, isn't it?
I think that was it, is that I was aware that I'm aware of, I didn't exactly explicitly say that. That is the phrase that emerged as a result of my postgrad research, looking back on my career was, okay, I'm going to refer to this as systems creativity. And yeah, to answer your question really, is when I approach a project, that's kind of what that systems creativity entails, is that you look back, you don't automatically, let's say you are doing a project that you know you're going to draw on sound or visual arts or your interactive technologies or whatever discipline you're practicing in, you don't fall into the habits of your traditional practice. So all of the established workflows, all of the established outputs that come with being a dancer or a musician or an animator, you kind of put them to one side and you kind of think about what those disciplines afford you. So for me, what it represents being a multidisciplinary is that you're able to kind of be creative while targeting effectively the different sensory perception we have as humans. So, I know obviously at Screenless, you're very much, your philosophy is very much around let's step away from the screen and actually just engage in the modality of sound. Yes. And that's what I'm really excited by when you look at interdisciplinary practice like that. It's that you go, right, sound has a set of affordances. And yes, you can make music with them. And yes, you can put on live shows with them, but there's so much more to sound if you look at it in its purest sense. And it's the same thing for every other modality. So thinking about, what we can see, what we can hear, what we can touch, and even what we can taste and smell as well. So that's one of the other things that as a systems creative, I look to explore is this multi-sensory effectively, as well as multidisciplinary. Yeah, creative experience design is the best way to sum it up, really. That's what this new identity that I've kind of coined represents.
Do you find that clients and people you're working with are open to that? Because I suppose it's, change. People
it
don't
is
like
change.
it, do they?
No,
but
not at
are
all.
People
No.
are open-minded to, different disciplines to deliver an idea?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the reason it emerged from myself and the reason it's something that I'm looking to kind of advocate really is it's not a replacement of boo to specialism. Specialism, as you said, is a beautiful thing. And it when you specialize, you go down, it's not about breadth, it's about depth. And depth is incredibly valuable when it comes to, production of all kinds or outputs of all kinds across the creative industry. But there are a set of people who, I suppose when you move away from kind of wider team-based productions or organizations, there are a movement of practitioners out there that are, one of the reasons more and more people have become multidisciplinary is that they've had to resort much more to themselves to kind of navigate the creative gig economy, to find working opportunities, and having multiple disciplines kind of strengthens your ability to do that. So what I think systems creativity has enabled me to kind of convey really is that you're able to kind of approach projects that kind of just move away from those expected perspectives for your discipline. So yes, there are jobs out there where you'll be pulled in as, you can do sound, I'd love you to edit sound for this animation that I'm making, and that's a very distinct workflow where systems creativity, that perspective of it, isn't necessarily required. But there are definitely jobs that I've done where, so one of the first jobs that I did as I left university was actually building an interactive sound app. One of the things that happened as a result of that process really was that I found myself in that working opportunity after having completed a music degree. I didn't necessarily have a background in programming. I had an interest in graphic design. And what happened is I ended up, and I had an ability to work in sound design and music and soundtrack production, which was obviously an important element for the nature of this app we were commissioned to develop. But there was obviously something that I went to university to do. There was something I had an interest in that was also needed there. And then there was this skill of developing an app that I'd never, ever done. So it was like, right, how do you, without, the resources and the funding to pull together a multidisciplinary team, how can you make that happen as an independent, as a freelancer? And that was the first time I found myself doing that. And I've done that for 10 years now. It's about kind of with, in collaboration, maybe one or two other people, making kind of multifaceted projects happen by thinking systemically about how you can bring your own abilities and your own, even expanding your own abilities to pull that off. So I guess that's it, is that you say people don't like change. And I think it's not about trying to change that world of things. It's about, hey, there's this other avenue now where you can kind of sustain yourself as a creative professional, that it just broadens your opportunity to, if you go, the traditional production work is running a bit thin this month, maybe we could go for some arts funding and do a public engagement project that pulls together some interesting elements of these disciplines in a new way, basically.
Yeah. And these days with the internet, I suppose if you don't know how to do something, there's somewhere online where you can learn.
Absolutely.
Do you rely on those kinds of resources?
Every single day. I think one thing that's become it was again an accident for the first sort of 5-6 years of my working history, but what's become much more routine is I tend to take on opportunities now where I have to learn something new in order to kind of realize it. So it's actually, again, that's one of the other philosophies of being a systems creative, is going, learning's going to happen as part of paid work. Actually, don't avoid that. That's actually something that if you acknowledge it, you can not only make it work, but it's going to have a positive effect on the next opportunity that you take on. So it's kind of about making growth an occupational condition, really. It's about making it something that inherently happens as part of the opportunities you take on. And it's been made really possible because we've got the equivalent of the Library of Alexandria at our fingertips and in our pockets, haven't we? The information that's out there to learn this stuff is there. And you won't unlock a PhD level specialism in any of those things, but you'll definitely be able to unlock an ability to achieve a proficiency to a degree that enables the wider project to succeed. And it's not necessarily about depth, it's about breadth. And I think that's again another thing about systems creativity is your interests and your current skills are part of a much wider system. And if you acknowledge that system and connect with that system, you can really allow it to pull you in some interesting directions and allow your practice to thrive. And allow yourself to be surprised by it as well.
Personally, I can sit in an empty room in silence and it's still playtime in my brain. I'm getting the impression that you're that kind of person as well.
Oh yes.
there's just stuff going on. You're almost a witness to what's going on in your head. And I suppose in a multidisciplined way, that's only magnified, isn't it? Because you've got all these new skills going on. It's like, the possibilities which were limitless are now even more limitless, if that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And so systems thinking as a kind of philosophy is an independent philosophy that exists out there in the world. So it kind of exists strong, most prevalently in the kind of business analytics of business and kind of the way that classic blue tie kind of CEOs and corporates kind of analyze the way that their services interact with customers, and it comes very much from that world. And I think what that world is not necessarily traditionally associated with the arts. So that was another thing that kind of made me think about systems creativity is that intersection of looking at it's been quite empirical, quite objective about your reality, the world in which you're in, what you can pull off at this moment in time right now, how people are going to react with that. And then with the other side of the puzzle being about that kind of creative spirit, that creative freedom, wanting to send a message to build work. And I think that's the other thing is that it definitely comes from a kind of strengthening of practice thing. I mean, one of the other reasons I kind of established this professional kind of identity is that I also work in higher education. So I'm a lecturer at University of Gloucester in the digital media school, and I'm actually not tied to any one course at the school. So my position there is actually cross course because of the nature in which I conduct my practice. So I teach on. I've taught on 5 of the courses so far. I actively teach across 3 of them as part of my kind of annual 1 day a week that I work there. Which sounds like it's being spread quite thin in many ways, because obviously even being full-time on one course at university is quite an ordeal. Yeah. But that was it. Is a kind of about one of the things I've been advocating with undergrads is about I'll meet many people who have gone to university who are learning something they care really deeply about, especially in the media and art schools. It's very much passion-driven students entering higher education for 3 years and figuring out how they're going to make something of this. And I kind of use this narrative of being, a systems creative to help them just kind of strengthen their ability to sustain themselves the moment they go out of the door. One of the things I try to encourage them to think about is, why are you into being, for example, a sound engineer? And I'll meet many sound engineers who go, I went to a concert 10 years ago, changed my life. It was an incredible experience. And you go, that's absolutely wonderful. And then they'll say, therefore, I'm going to work in concert sound, live production, as an engineer. And you go, right, hold that thought, because where you found your passion, don't just limit yourself to where you discovered what you care about, because there are many more people, organizations, problems, contexts in which your skills and your passions can exist beyond where you discovered them. So it's kind of, again, not being locked by the traditional definition of your what, and find that why. Why is it that you would change that night? What made you think, wow, I need to become a sound engineer? And when we get to that little grain of sand, that little grit in the oyster, it's like they'll say, oh, I just love the fact that you can sculpt, manipulate, and output sound to make people feel a certain way. You go, right, that's the fundamental of why you're passionate. Now, where can that exist? And suddenly you map this out and you go, well, it can kind of exist anywhere, can't it? You go, yes, it can. It could exist in entertainment by all means, and that's a valid thing. But it could also exist in health and well-being. It could exist in education, the cultural sector. There's so many opportunities that just bloom. And I think sometimes, I know students have been told for many years to diversify your practice and do this because actually it'll make you much more resilient and much more employable as you leave university. And in my experience, that kind of alienates a lot of people because I think it's asking them to change who they feel they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I've kind of tried to come at it from this kind of systems creative perspective. It says there's a why to why you feel that way. Engage with the why instead of the what. And Brilliant. you will find that you're not changing who you are. You're just realizing you can apply yourself in many more territories.
Yeah. And actually, your lecturing work, that is a perfect example of a client embracing that philosophy.
Absolutely.
Because they put you over different courses. There you go, working in practice.
That's absolutely it.
That's amazing. You mentioned music degree.
Yes.
I work in sound. I produce podcasts. I help people with podcasts. I write music. I write soundtracks. And I suppose music, to me, is my kind of second language. Yeah. That's the kind of thing I'd fall back on, my default almost. Do you have a default?
I do. Yeah. So I will say that through and through, in terms of where my how I realised I wanted to find myself working in the creative industry, the fact that I wanted to aim for that territory before I went to university was I absolutely love music. I went to study after A-levels and really discovering, getting into kind of traditional soundtracking, composition, notation. I went to study a course called Creative Sound and Music in 2008 and graduated in 2011. And as I said, I came out of that course again, still focused in music, but suddenly quickly realizing that, I had an opportunity to do a really, really exciting project to develop this interactive sound app. And the reason I went for that is because it did have sound and music at its heart. So even though I've kind of acknowledged that, I do love creative, I don't want to lock it down to just sound, but to be completely honest with myself, although I don't now define myself by any of the disciplines I practice in, if I was, as you're doing right now, Gareth, asking me to kind of choose one, it would indeed be sound. It would be music. It would be, sound design and music composition, basically.
Yeah. And that's not to say that the other skill sets aren't, you can't be as passionate about or anything. I'm writing little rhymes that I've been recording as audio, but I'm still writing poetry, And I think creativity, when it shows itself, should be embraced. You shouldn't say, well, I don't do that, so therefore I can't.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think some people do a better job at dealing with that than others. So, I think there's some people that go through and go, I'm not going to feel guilty about being a multidisciplinary. I think my experience is a little bit different because as I said, as I moved from maybe doing a sound project, then to doing an illustration project, then to doing a kind of user interface design project or coding projects, I'd been known within my network say, oh, you're doing coding now, are you? I thought you were an illustrator. And you go, no. And it's this kind of, you kind of get broken down into, in the early days, definitely heard that jack of all trades dismissal, which I think can be really destructive because, again, it's saying, in the same way that I'm not saying specialism shouldn't be a thing, they're saying that generalism shouldn't be a thing. And it should be a duality that you can exist anywhere across that spectrum, really. So I think that's another reason why I kind of, I'm not ashamed to say that I do primarily view myself as a music practitioner, first and foremost within that spectrum of things that I do. But I think it's just helped me navigate it a bit more, client's relationship, being able to talk, introduce myself as a systems creative. And then when they say, well, what does that mean? It means, it means that when you talk about the disciplines, they're always secondary. They're not a primary thing. And I think it's just massively helped with that because the nature of your projects really add up for question then. If you go, well, if you're a musician, why are you making sound that sounds like this? All of those things kind of go out of the window. It's like, oh, well, you're a systems creative, and actually you are using these now with the perspective of, in the same way that a musician could use multiple instruments to fulfill their craft.
Well, this systems is it, creative, and multiple styles and genres and things.
Exactly, yeah. It's kind of like the next resolution, if you will, I suppose. It's if a picture's made up of pixels, you can still make a picture with a combination of pictures. It's like, how far out could you zoom from that? And I suppose in a way that's another kind of perspective that I kind of try to adopt with being a systems creative is actually music is, I'd say one of the spices on the spice rack.
Well, I think it's a much better model for creative business actually than the one that where you have to decide on your peg to hang everything from. I think creativity it should be by definition limitless and just as large as your imagination. So why not?
Yeah.
But I think that's absolutely fabulous. So where can people find you online, Leigh, if they want to go and check out some of your work?
So my main hub really is my website. So I kind of have an umbrella website that catches all of the work that I do in the various disciplines that I practice. So you can find that at www.leighdavescreative.com. I obviously have social media as well, but I'd say my main channel is probably Twitter. I tend to practice, most of my kind of social comms go through Twitter really beyond my website. So you can find me on Twitter at Leigh J. Davies, and that's the same tag on other platforms as well.
Fantastic. Well, I'll pop those in the show notes, those links as well.
Oh, thanks very much.
But for now, Leigh Davies, Systems Creative, thanks for joining me for a cuppa.
Oh, thank you very much, Gareth. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again to Leigh for his fascinating insights into his creativity. Engage with the why instead of the what. I think there's a lesson for us all there. Amazing stuff. His links are in the show notes, so go and take a look if you want to see and hear more of what Leigh has been up to. This podcast is produced by The Sound Boutique, so if you are looking for help with any sort of audio production, head to www.thesoundboutique.com. Full disclosure, it's my company, and I'd be delighted to have a chat with you if you need a solution to your audio questions. Creative Cuppa is published under the Screenless audio brand, so you can follow on the socials for updates and extra stuff using @ScreenlessPod, and all those links are in the show notes too. As always, thank you for listening, have a spectacular week, and until next time, thanks for joining me for a cuppa.